welcome back. Say hello to Major George Filer. First of all, hello, George, the editor and creator of Filer's Files. We'll talk more about them in the next couple of hours. George?
Hi, Jeff. How are you tonight?
I'm here, and glad to have you aboard. Hope you had a nice Christmas with Janet yesterday and the family.
Yes, we did. Merry Christmas to everybody out there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And Frank Chille, our friend and co-producer here on the program for so many programs. Are you there, Frank?
Good evening, Jeff. Merry Christmas to you and your fine audience. It's wonderful to join you and George this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frank, as always. Frank Chille produces one Friday evening, 2-hour segment a month, and sometimes more than that, supplying all of us with some marvelous people to interview and talk with about their experiences. George Filer, if you're new to the program, is the man who created Filer's Files, former U.S. Air Force major who chased UFOs in the air in the 1950s and has a long history of top-level security clearance and briefings with some of the biggest generals and officials in the American military. He has been at the crossroads. How many?
I was chasing them in the 60s and 70s.
60s and 70s. All right. They're still there to be chased. I'm sure they're still being chased. But we have a story that I'm so glad that more information has come forward. I don't know what it is. I'm looking forward to hearing it. And you might want to tell us, George, first of all, your background in the McGuire Air Force Base event, what your role was, even though you weren't directly and hands-on in the front lines, so to speak, with it, but you were there when it happened, or very shortly thereafter. So, McGuire Air Force Base, what is it, what was it, and what happened? And tell us about your
Oh, you want to start off with that, huh?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I was Major Deputy Charge of Intelligence at 7th Air Force Headquarters at McGuire. And every morning I would brief General Sadler, and she might say what was going on in the world. Pretty much like the evening news that you get, if it's
of course
6:30 or whatever, and there's 4 big screens and everything. Well, to do that, I have to go in to work pretty early in the morning to prepare the briefing, like 4 or 5 o'clock. So on January 18th, 1978, I drove into the base, and normally they would wave me right through the gate, in the morning.
Sure.
Almost knew who I was every morning, but this morning they stopped me and made me show my ID card and asked me a few questions and so on. So I knew that something was up, so to speak. And as I drove on base, I could see a bunch of lights out on the runway, the southernmost runway on the base, that something was going on there, fire trucks and...
So the runway was full of vehicles and lights. Okay.
Right. So I knew something was going on. Well, I went into the 7th Air Force Command Post, which is a huge building with like 5-foot thick concrete walls. Actually, it was built to withstand nuclear weapons. Uh-huh. And as I walked into the command post, actually you have to go through, give you certain numbers to get in and so on. That's a classified area. And as I walked in, the master sergeant in charge of the command post, who pretty much ran things, came up to me and said, we need you to brief General Sadler this morning about the alien being shot out at Fort Dix and ended up on the end of the runway. And I said, well, an alien like a Mexican or something. And they said, no, this is an alien from outer space. I said, are you kidding? An alien from outer space was on the base and it was being shot. Well, in any case, I said, General Sadler doesn't have a real good sense of humor, and when I brief him and the other generals, they're going to want to know a lot more, and this is kind of a tough situation, to put it bluntly.
Yes, it was put right in your lap. What you did as the top and chief security briefing officer for these people was basically give them their knowledge from which they would make their decisions. This is a crucial role you played.
Yeah, I did that for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Briefing four-star generals and the like, and Vietnam and the Cuban Missile Crisis and so on and so forth. We could spend all evening talking about all that, which is actually mostly in a book that was written about me called...
Okay.
Strange Craft, in any case. But
we'll mention the book later. Don't worry about it. We'll get there.
So
let me say one other thing. This is a top level, highest priority issue that George is describing. On a very secure U.S. Air Force base, George comes to work in the morning, and you heard the deal. He wasn't waved right through the gate, and was told that an alien, an ET, had been shot on the base, on the runway at Fort Dix, which is right there. Go ahead.
Well, in any case, they said that, a group of people, officers and so on, were coming in from Washington, D.C. to handle it, and that aircraft, a C-141, which I flew, was coming in from Wright-Patterson to pick up the body.
Uh-huh.
And so,
who told you this, George?
This is this Master Sergeant that pretty much ran the place.
Okay.
In other words, he was the...
Yeah.
He would do everything.
He was the guy that made things happen. I understand.
Right. And there's a lot of officers that work in there, but he's the guy that kind of ran things. Well, in any case, so I figured, well, I'm not going to go and brief the general without some backup information. So I started calling around different people on the base, the tower, and they said, yes, there's something going on out there. And
it was going on at the time you arrived for work.
Right. In other words, all these lights and people were apparently around the alien at that time. And
right. It was down on the ground. You had an alien down, and he was still out there, and they're flying in a big plane from Wright-Pat to pick it up. Interesting.
Right. And I called the military police, and they confirmed that, there was something going on the end of the runway, but it was classified and so on. I called the 438th Wing Command Post, which was below us, so to speak.
Yeah.
And talked to a colonel that I knew, and he more or less confirmed what I had just been told. So I started putting together a briefing of what was going on, and I called radar people, and the radar people said that there was UFOs in the pattern, and they've been there pretty much all night and so on. In other words, I got confirmation from various sources that this was a real incident.
So what you just said is very interesting, that there were UFOs on the radar screens most all the night. Now, I wonder, I don't know the time of the shooting, but were they coming to try to collect their own? Were they there before or after the shooting of the ET? Or during the whole thing?
I don't know exactly.
Do you have a timeline on it?
Yeah, I feel the shooting was around 1 a.m.
Okay. So, well, it makes sense. If they were on the radar screen all night, or quote all night, that's after 1 a.m. That's what I wanted to determine. Go ahead, please.
And we don't know exactly why we were there, but we've been getting additional information just in the last few weeks, interesting enough. A fellow talked to me, interesting enough, who was in the CIA. And he was a pilot flying a C-130 for the CIA, and the plane landed and, taxied up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he knew that something was going on the end of the runway. He could see that. When
did you talk to this gentleman, the CIA?
Just about 3 months ago.
Okay.
And he told me that they had come in from Europe, I believe, and landed and were ready to get out of the plane. MPs came up to the plane and said, "Do not get off the plane. You're restricted to the plane to stay here until things settle down." Now, they didn't tell them anything what was going on, but being interested, they turned on their radios. They were given power on the aircraft because it was real cold, so that they keep the aircraft warm, but then they had their radios available. And so they started listening on guard and so on to the various medical people and military police, and they're talking about the fact that the alien was shot, was there, and was apparently, they had the ambulance people out there to determine if they were alive, the body was alive or not, and tried to save it, but they couldn't do anything for it, from what I was told. And he has pretty much that similar story. And the newest information that we have, interestingly enough, was from 2 medics. And the medics were from Fort Dix. And they...
Now, Fort Dix, for our listeners, George, is directly adjacent to McGuire, right?
Right. There's really just a fence between the two.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, at one time it was all Fort Dix, and then when the aircraft came in, they made an airport, and put a fence in between. And the fence is kind of a chain link, metal chain link fence. And the story was that there's a very large ramp, which there's some question of why that huge ramp is there on the Fort Dix side. But it's like 800 feet long by a couple hundred feet wide. But in any case, that area.
George, when you say ramp, are you talking about an earthen ramp that had been built up, or is this a structure?
A concrete ramp where helicopters or other craft could land.
And up, is it now? It's not a horizontal flat ramp.
Yes, it's
is it angled upward?
Ramp.
Okay, so it's like a big
huge spotlights shining down on it, so that craft could land there at night.
Got it.
And the UFOs were speculating, but it had something to do with that ramp and the area near there. And the Fort Dix military police, according to our initial story, saw an alien who came out of a UFO and told him to stop, but he wouldn't stop. And,
okay, slow down. A UFO landed on the Fort Dix ramp, and ET disembarked from the UFO. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Right. Well, we're not exactly sure where the UFO landed, but...
Okay. All right.
But in any case, somewhere near that area, because that's also the area which is the end of the runway. In any case, when the alien wouldn't stop, the Fort Dix policeman, Army policeman, shot him. And what we think happened is that the alien ran to McGuire through the fence or over the fence or whatever, mortally wounded. And when he got to the runway area, died died on the spot. And that's
Give me a description. When did you get your first description of the size and features of this ET?
Well, I was told it was probably a gray, or at least what people called a gray. I talked to the McGuire Air Force Base policeman who found the body on the end of the runway. In other words, when the shooting went on, somewhere around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, Fort Dix notified McGuire that this alien, I'm not sure they knew who he was heading for McGuire, and the people at Fort Dix tried to find him, and then the people at McGuire tried to find him. So
nobody actually saw it go over the fence, but he somehow breached the fence.
But in any case, he got from the last indication of where he was at Fort Dix. Now, this is a story I'm being told by the Air Force security officer.
George, you're talking to the Air Force. You're talking to the Air Force security officer who actually was the one who found the deceased extraterrestrial on the McGuire runway, correct?
Right.
All right. What time was this? 5 a.m., 6 a.m.?
No, this is still around 1 o'clock or so, 1 a.m. or so.
You got there that early? Oh, wait, when did you talk to him?
I wasn't there that early. I was there about 4 a.m.
All right. Okay,
and
so you talked to this guy.
What happened previously.
Right. Yeah, you talked to this guy then around 5 or 6 a.m., something like that?
Actually, I talked to him several weeks later, but...
Okay, fine. How was his demeanor when he was telling you what he experienced?
Well, he was rather upset because almost immediately after this happened, within a day or so, he was transferred to the Pacific Ocean to an island out there. Sounds funny, but
they got him out of there.
And what happens to me is I was retired immediately. Almost anybody who knows about the situation is retired or transferred, and that's how they keep it secret. They don't.
I understand. How did you get the audience with this guy? How did you get to sit down and talk to him? Was it still at that time under official security, and you're representing the military, the Air Force, and he's complying with that request from whoever to tell you?
It happened that, it sounds like a roundabout way, but Leonard Stringfield, I don't know if you knew him, but he was a researcher, was on radio, and he was contacted by this individual. And I also let it be known that I, knew something about it. In other words, I didn't actually see the alien, so people can take the story from there.
Got it.
But in any case, he contacted Leonard Stringfield and wrote about it, and then contacted us long distance. In other words, actually, Leonard gave him my telephone number for him to call me. So,
got it.
Knowing that we had, in other words, that I knew something about it from a different standpoint as an intelligence officer.
He's putting you two together. I understand. Okay. Now, you talked to the guy.
He seemed real enough and so on that, and the interesting thing was that, they got the word from Fort Dix that this alien was there. They didn't say alien ET, just, alien, so that they're out looking for someone who's, on the end of the runway.
A trespasser. Okay.
Possibly alive,
Mm-hmm.
But I think they did tell him that they, shot at him, so he could be mortally wounded. And I think he told him that he thought he hit the person as well. And that something along the line that he was sorry he shot him, but he was frightened, and the situation was that he needed to stop him because he was in a classified area and so on. In any case, he shot him. But I never talked to that individual, but that's the story I got.
You did talk to the guy who found the body.
Right.
That's what we're talking. We're not talking about the two medics now. We're going to get back to that.
Sergeant Morris, but I don't know if that's in fact his name.
All right, we're going to get to the medics in a few minutes, but this fellow is telling you his story about how he found the E.T. body. I'm going to go through this break. I want to hear this. Do you know, George, can you remember how he described seeing the alien body, what he noticed, what he observed? What did he say to you?
He said he didn't really see it real well, so to speak. But
it was in the dark, semi-darkness?
Yeah, it was dark. It's the middle of the night. It's cold. Matter of fact,
might have
shortly
vehicle headlights. Might have been vehicle headlights. That was it.
He was in his Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, he was claimed to be with a state policeman. And after they found the body, they asked the state policeman to leave the base. And there was kind of like a big alert for this trespasser, and then they found out he wasn't a normal person. And best he could describe was kind of a gray and kind of a smaller person, like 4.5 feet tall, that kind of thing.
Right.
He didn't give me. Actually, they sent me a picture, but the picture didn't give you any detail, that he had drawn. Well, in any case,
let me ask you this.
I was more interested in the story, and I've been trying to find out things for years. And for example, they closed the road on Fort Dix at night between the various towns that you drive through and stuff. A lot of things happen that were odd, but in effect they're not real evidence. And a lady called me and said that her father woke her up one night, and they lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and they were going to McGuire on a exercise, and that he grabbed his wife and his daughter, and they drove to McGuire and actually stayed in a motel. Now, the Sergeant Moore said that he was there guarding the body for several hours when some sergeants from D.C. came and replaced him. And they said, "Get going, buddy," and they were very kind of nasty towards him. And that was one of the reasons why he was telling people about the fact that he had found a body, because these people that took over from him in the middle of the night were so disparaging, acting
abusive
towards him.
Right, I understand. And then he got transferred to a Pacific island, which would really make him unhappy.
Okinawa.
Okay. All right. Okay, Okinawa. All right. That's a big base there.
Right. And so just recently,
But before we leave that venue, let me go back to the night that the morning you were there, middle of the night. Did you talk to anyone that night, George, or the next day, who was present at the site of the body? Did you get that close to the information?
Well, Well, other than Sergeant Morris, he was pretty much there alone most of the night.
Really? They didn't run vehicles out there with lights?
Well, I guess the medic went out there and tried to find out that if they could revive the body, but when they arrived, he was gone, and there was really no hope,
So when you briefed the general,
he smelled.
Go ahead.
He smelled a lot. There's very strong odor from the body.
Mm-hmm. All right, I've heard that before too from other people, crash sites. Did you brief the general later that day?
Not actually. I actually briefed him, but not about that.
Well, he already knew, and he didn't need to hear about it?
Before I went on with the briefing to tell him about it, and there's like 50 people in the command post. They said they didn't want it spread around,
Oh, okay. You were told not to discuss it in front of all those people.
Right.
All right. Had you been able to put together a pretty... Go ahead, George. Go on.
That morning, I went in there with if things are top secret or above, they're in a folder, and the general reads them, and there's not normally conversation about them because somebody could theoretically be listening in. He just reads this report.
Eyes
so
only.
I gave him some information, a little bit on the report, and he said he was aware of that. And when I arrived, a colonel who was in charge of the security police was there in briefing the general. And when he came out, he said, I briefed the general about the alien. So I really didn't, give him any further information than he already had from the head of security police.
Got it. Did the plane from Wright Pat come in and depart while you were there? Do you remember?
Yes.
You saw it?
Well, I saw there's dozens of C-141s. I saw what I assumed was
the one. Okay.
It's being taken.
Yeah.
And I flew the 141s as well. So, but I was surprised that there was any 141s at Wright-Patterson, and they just had a couple for this kind of a situation.
Understand. That's retrieval and recovery work. Okay. Now,
Leonard Stringfield talked to the major who flew the C-141. And the major on the C-141 who went to Wright-Patterson said he never saw the body, but he just picked up a box with the body in it, so to speak, and flew it to Wright-Patterson.
Okay. Now, let's fast forward and talk about these medics that you have new information from.
Now, the medics, at the time, Fort Dix was an active Army base, and it was training people in infantry, and there was a lot of ranges for firing, weapons, M16s and so on. And the two medics were in their vehicle, and because of the fact that people on occasion, were shot or hurt in some way, the medic's job was to go out to the ranges and see if, anybody's hurt or get called. In other words, it's several miles out there, so they would be, we'll say a half mile from where somebody's shot, and obviously the thing is to get them as quickly as possible to stop the bleeding and so on.
Right.
In any case, two of them are out there, and their job were, interesting enough, both of them were named Carlos, and one was a sergeant, one was a Panamanian, any case, the two of them are out there, doing their regular job. And as evening came, they're off work at about 7:30. In other words, end of the shift is at 7:30, and there's another shift that goes on after them.
Mm-hmm.
So when it got dark, they saw some UFOs in the sky, and they don't know what happened, but their watches said 7:30, and they woke up, and it was about 11:30 or 12 o'clock.
Where were they at the time? Were they in their, let's just call it their station? Mm-hmm.
They had been driving around the base, and they were at near one of these ranges, but when they woke up, they were by this ramp that I mentioned, this large ramp with trees and so forth around it that looks out over the end of the runway at McGuire.
Okay.
And I don't know if he's a private eye. The lesser Carlos with lesser rank woke
Carlos
up
the Lesser. Yeah.
Woke up before the sergeant woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets out of the ambulance and walks over to the fence there, and he's looking over at McGuire and sees a UFO that has landed near or on the runway. He's not sure exactly where it was, but over in that different direction about 100 yards away. And he could see three aliens. Two of the aliens were near the craft, and one was very close to the fence where he was. And he could hear some shooting going on. This is, again, around midnight. And the alien who's closest to him, who he felt was a gray, the shorter aliens with the big eyes and so on. Most people are familiar with what the grays look like. Well, in any case, the gray is looking at him and doesn't say anything, but in his mind he hears the fact that the alien says, "Please do not shoot," that he's very frightened. And he telepathically answers that I'm not going to shoot you. I'm a medic. I don't know if he even had a gun, as far as that goes. But in any case, he answered him and had some, you might call a conversation, but telepathically between the two of them. And then the alien ran towards the UFO, and he assumed got in, and it took off. Now, he didn't know if any of the aliens had been shot at that time, although he says he did hear the sound of, guns going off.
Uh-huh.
And he's pretty sure that he and his buddy were, picked up during the
missing
evening.
Time. Several hours of missing time.
With a missing time. And they had some indications on their body, that like their clothes may have been off or whatever. But in any case, they feel that they were abducted. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. They didn't really have proof that they were abducted, but they feel that that's what happened early on.
All right.
Now,
so at this time, let me recap. Their missing time ends. The lesser of the two Carloses wakes up first, gets out of the ambulance, sees a UFO across the fence parked on the runway or near the runway at McGuire. Yeah, and the UFO apparently is lit up enough to where he can see three extraterrestrials outside the craft, near the craft, and one of them comes over near him. I guess the fence is separating them, and makes that appeal telepathically, don't shoot me. And they were afraid. And then they get back in, the three of them get back in the craft, and the craft takes off. Now, this is before the medics see the body or are called in to check on the body. So pick it up from right there. The UFO is left. And do remember that most all that night there were UFOs reportedly on the radar at McGuire Air Force Base, flying around, maybe landing. One landed, according to this eyewitness. So what happened next? You got the two medics there.
Several people said that they felt that the UFOs are angry. I don't know how you determine that, but, buzzing the base and so on.
Well, one of their own was shot. I think that may be the answer, huh?
And they may have been trying to find him, or we don't know exactly what they were doing, even why they were there. But maybe this was an abduction that went bad, so to speak, or possibly other people were abducted. We don't know. We're just surmising these things.
Mm-hmm.
But we have more information than we've ever had,
Okay. What else do we have? What else did the medics say? Anything?
Well, mostly there's information about telepathic, communication and the fact that they felt that they were abducted. Oh, and then they went back to the hospital area where they, you might say,
stationed.
Jobs with other people who are coming on. And those people were very angry at them and, in effect, didn't believe their story. They thought it was kind of wild. In any case, because they had shown up like after midnight, after supposedly going to check in at 7:30. I don't know if they had
so the Fort Dix, the two Carlos medics vanished, basically, and showed up to go off shift, so to speak, about midnight-ish, and they're 2 or 3 hours late. That's what's going on, and the other people were upset about it.
Right. Now, since then I've asked a lot of different people that I know what they knew about it, and one sounds funny, but my wife sold real estate for years, and one of the people that she sold a house to was a colonel that ran the hospital. And
at Fort Dix.
At Fort Dix. And he just said in so many words that I told him the story, and he said, that's all I know. In other words, he confirmed that from the hospital standpoint, and they really didn't know that much, other than the fact that the ambulance went out there and checked the body and then came back rather quickly because...
hold on. Was this a Fort Dix ambulance that went out there and checked the body, or a McGuire ambulance that went out there and checked the body?
It was a Fort Dix.
So they must have driven through that fence to get to the body.
Well,
on the runway.
There's entrances, gates to the...
Yeah. They crossed over into McGuire.
Right.
And they one of them examined the body. Now, those medics you have not spoken to. We don't know who they are. Okay.
Now, another part of this is I had 4 screens in the command post that I would brief the generals on. And I had, lots of pictures of mostly aircraft and, maps, what we're talking about and so on. Kind of like you watching video and so on TV, where we try to make it as interesting as possible.
Sure.
For the generals to help explain the situation. And one chart would show what aircraft we would have in an area. Say we were flying to Greece or something, we'd say, there's something happening in Greece, then we have 3 aircraft flying into Greece today, or wherever it happened to be. We were in charge of Air Force One. The president and the vice president, all those craft, some 600 aircraft that we had and that we're in charge of, and we had to keep track of them. Flew from basically Afghanistan to the Mississippi River was our area, half the world.
Mm-hmm.
Any case, different people at different time. It sounds funny, but I talked to an air crew that was in Germany, and they heard most of the communications long distance while they're flying in Germany. Communications
the
are kind
McGuire
of funny,
Air Force Base chatter. They were hearing the McGuire chatter all the way in Germany.
Right. That's what they told me. And I also talked to people in the comm center who claimed they had sent out a message along this line, this kind of thing. Oh, with these 4 screens I had to keep filled, mostly with slides, I would go to the base photo lab almost every day and get, the latest slides that are coming, the information that's coming in, intelligence and so on, the new Russian T-71 tank or new aircraft or whatever, so we could brief the generals. Well, in any case, I went over there that morning, and about 10 o'clock, which was standard, and the fellow that I dealt with a lot was a sergeant. He said, he's holding in his hand an 8x10 envelope, and he says, "You ought to see what's in here." And he starts to give it to me, and his captain comes over and he says, "Major Fowler is not cleared for that." And I said, "Well, I'm the general's briefer. I know all about this." He says, "We're sorry, we have a strict orders not to show it to anybody." Any case, I believe there was pictures of the alien in that envelope. Actually, I couldn't prove it, but I'm just the way they were acting and everything.
Sure.
These things are kept, as quiet as possible. And
well, the inference is obvious. You're right. Now the dead alien was picked up by a 141 and flown back to Wright-Patterson. It's probably still there today. We don't know. There's a lot of underground facilities there. Yeah.
And they examine and so on. Now now predicting the future, so to speak. Trump just signed that there's going to be a Space Force. Mm-hmm. And there's more data coming out all the time about our alleged Space Force, that we have, spaceships up there and so on. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about UFOs and the fact that they're here, that I've been told.
Well, the Navy's already said that, though, George. The Navy has already made that statement. Yeah.
We're going to open up this information, gradually to the public.
Well, didn't the Navy already make that pronouncement that there are UFOs, that they don't know what they are? They encounter them very frequently. I think the one inference was about off the East Coast, the southern East Coast of the U.S. They run into them all the time. This had to do with that so-called tic-tac UFO story.
Right.
Now, in my view, if the Navy made that statement, let me bring Frank in here now. Frank, if the Navy made such a statement, isn't that more or less a formal announcement that the cover-up is over?
That's how I viewed it. They were saying that they were seeing discs from North Carolina and Virginia all the way down to Florida on a daily basis.
Correct. All right.
And the aircraft carriers were seeing them on a regular basis. Many were flying over them.
Mm-hmm.
They had them on radar, and the planes were chasing him, and they had them on gun camera film and, radars and the whole works.
Did you ever see that picture, George? It was a Photoshop picture of a UFO disc landed on one of the carrier decks allegedly. It was a daylight picture. That picture was circulating for a while. It was a...
I had received that photograph, if you recall, Jeff, originally from Commander Graham Bethune, and he had gotten it from Admiral, oh my gosh, terms of my tongue, not Dabney, but he had gotten several photographs from this admiral and he shared them with me, and it had along the side official U.S. Navy document, top secret, and it had the date of 1954. Right. And we found out later that it was indeed a doctored photograph. Yeah. But when Graham had gotten it and showed it to me, it was on very thick stock, and it was an original photograph. I'd never seen paper that thick before with a photograph. It was stamped on both the front side of the photograph in the white margin and also on the back. Eyes only, top secret, official U.S. Navy document, photo, 1954. And he let me take a photograph of it. And I shared it with George and I shared it with others, but it came out later that it was a doctored photograph.
Yeah. George, have you ever heard of...
told me...
Go ahead, Frank.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, when I shared that photograph with Bill Tompkins, Bill said that there were incidences where discs would land on aircraft carriers and there would be meetings. And he said to me, the way the tripod for that disc was designed, he said it would actually fold up underneath the ship. He had seen photographs similar to that before. And although that document or that photograph was a doctored one, Bill Tompkins swore that there were landings on aircraft carriers of the same type of craft.
George, have you ever heard a report of a landing on a carrier like that?
Well, I saw that Commander Bethune also gave me that picture, so I've seen it. I've talked to, numerous Navy personnel who claim that the UFOs have flown over and they've gotten all kinds of photos and radar and so on, and that some, I don't know if you call them strange men, but men who actually had very high clearances would come on the helicopter, come on the carrier like the Nimitz and take the
statements,
the tapes away.
And get these would be people in suits, I think, or civilian
often in
clothes.
Suits, often what were likely CIA, but we don't know for certain. I do know that General Quest, Kwast, who was in charge of education in the Air Force, gave a speech at the Hillsdale College, and he gave a wide-ranging speech describing the power of new technologies to revolutionize humankind, and that we have competitive advantages over other countries that they hope to keep, and that part of that would be the Space Force. And he strongly recommended the Space Force. And interestingly enough, he was retired shortly thereafter. In other words, they felt that he gave too much information away. Now, this is the Air Force. Now, the Navy is revealing a lot more than the Air Force seems to want of relief.
That's an interesting observation. Now, you mentioned earlier, unless I misunderstood you, that your retirement came shortly after the McGuire event?
Yes.
And you didn't voluntarily retire. They told you you're retiring. Is that it?
Right. That I was one on the base who knew too much, and there was a colonel that ran the wing, the whole C-141 wing, and he was transferred. There was quite a few of us that were either transferred or retired.
Wow. All right. Wow. Fascinating. We'll be right back with Major George Filer and Frank Chille and all of you in just a few minutes. Hold on. All right. Welcome back. And What you have just heard in the preceding hour from George Filer is probably the most complete overview and summary of the apparent shooting death of an extraterrestrial on Fort Dix initially, and he died on the runway at adjacent McGuire Air Force Base. Go ahead, George.
I'm back. We had communication problems.
No, you're good. We're good.
That's an exciting story. I think that I'm sure there's other situations that have occurred with aliens. Unfortunately, he was killed, and I always felt sorry for him. That sounds funny, but I'm not sure he should have been killed, but it was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know how that goes.
Yeah. Okay, Frank Chille, the conversation you had with Bill Tompkins, I think I had a similar conversation with him. I can't remember now, but when you think about it, what better venue for a meeting than to have an ET craft land on a supercarrier out in the middle of the ocean?
Well, that's exactly right, Jeff. And I wanted to make a correction to you and your audience. The Rear Admiral that Graham was getting those photos from was Admiral Delmar Farney, Fahrney. And Bill told me, he said the reason that they would have the meetings out in the middle of the ocean is there'd be no prying eyes. And he said it happened many, many times, dozens of times. And
for those of you thinking, what about the 3,000 or 4,000 crewmen and women who were on the boat, the ship? They just were ordered under decks, back to their compartments.
That's right.
It's not hard, and you'd have a small.
He said they were told to stay down below decks.
Yeah, and they'd have the bridge personnel, but they would obviously be under extreme suggestions to keep quiet. Huh? All right. Mm-hmm. That would make perfect sense.
The photos that he saw, Jeff, of the craft when it would be hovering above the aircraft carrier deck, and then when it would leave, and he said that tripod would fold down as it's getting ready to land and fold up right underneath the ship, and he said it would be seamless because he saw footage of them, but he said that photograph that we had gotten from Commander Bethune, he said that's the first time he's ever seen a photograph like that was released, but he had seen them in his own work.
When we talk about the deaths of extraterrestrials who may have been on this planet the planet is 4.5 billion years old. And if there is, and we know there is, plenty of intelligent life out there in this galaxy and in the universe, this planet has probably been visited for billions of years. Think about it.
Sure.
We just got here. We're not even a tick on the timeline. Nothing. So, yeah. And during the 1950s, as Frank and George know, Frank Frascino has written a book that is extremely well documented. 17 years Frank spent documenting the Air Force's orders to shoot them down. E.T. craft. Shoot them down. That's the title of the book. Shoot them down. So from approximately 1952 to 1955 or thereabout, I don't remember because I haven't read the book in a long time, there were hundreds of U.S. military aviators who died, or hundreds of craft down and probably that many aviators gone. They tried to shoot these things down, a big mistake, and when the program was turned around and the orders rescinded, they were told to replace the bullets with cameras, and that ended the loss of the air crew. Frank found so many newspaper stories of crashed military aircraft, just incredible amounts of it, and other documentation as well. It's called Shoot Them Down. That's the book. Go ahead, George.
Well, when I was in England, they used to send the fighters up after the UFOs, And, well, we get a report that, aircraft is down in the North Sea or whatever and have to go out and search for it. Now, we didn't know for certain if, they were chasing UFOs or not, or what happened. But I was in a tanker outfit that refueled the fighters, and they started asking our squadron, refueling tankers, to go after the UFOs. And that's how I got involved, that we had no weapons on board, and a fighter could only stay up, aloft an hour or so, and we could fly almost as fast as a fighter, but we could stay out. We were a gas station in the air, 16 hours of fuel or whatever.
Right.
So we could stay up a long time, unless we used our engines at top speed. You burn a lot faster that way. But in any case, we could. The cases that I did chase them, we could get near them, and when we got near them, they would almost always fly away. But some of them were huge craft.
You saw these in daytime and nighttime sightings, I guess. Tell us about the huge craft. Pick one sighting.
Well, the most significant sighting was that we were actually on a refueling mission just as the sun went down, and London Control asked us to
Lumley?
intercept.
Lumley? Lumley? Is that what you said? Lumley Control?
London Control.
Oh, London Control, okay.
Sorry if I'm not speaking too well. In any case, London Control asked us to intercept a UFO over the Stonehenge, Oxford area. And we were up on the North Sea off of Sandringham, actually where the Queen goes at Christmas time. And so in any case, it's about 100 miles down to Stonehenge from where we were. In any case, they cleared us. They gave us what's called the Queen's clearance, which means that all other aircraft have to be diverted out of our way so that we can go directly towards the UFO. And as we're diving down, we're like 33,000 feet during refueling, and the UFO was like 1,000 feet. So we're going down at a fairly steep angle, and we actually exceeded the red line of the aircraft, and it started shaking a little bit, and we just said, we better pull back on the power. And I often wonder if that's how some of these planes are lost, as they go past the red line and lose a tail or something. Well, in any case, as we're descending, I got the radar operating. I had two radars that I could use. One that was to bring the fighters into the tanker, and also the land radar. And both radars picked up a very large return. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with radar, but we used to fly over the Firth of Forth Bridge, which is similar to like the Brooklyn Bridge or the San Francisco Bay Bridge.
Right.
A bridge that's approximately a mile long and has a big, large return on the radar. Well, as we're going towards the UFO at about 50 miles or so, we got this big, large return on the radar that matched the bridge. Now, I don't know if the UFO was that big, but the radar return was essentially the same as this huge bridge in Scotland. In any case, as we got closer, we could see, by this time it's getting dark, we could see what amounted to like a cruise ship off in the distance. Like a... Well, looked pretty much like a ship if you've seen a ship out at sea with lots of lights on the side, and so on.
Right.
Except this is up flying about 1,000 feet high, and it's still on the radar. And as we got closer, got to about 5 miles away, and it looked huge. It's a huge ship off in the distance. It went up into space. If you've seen the shuttle launch it in the dark, it looked much like that going up into space. And that point, the London radar said we could return on our mission, and and we asked if there was any rockets going up in space from Stonehenge. They said no, just return to your mission. The point is there is something very exciting going up. The interesting part of the story is the Air Force. We reported to the Air Force, and they didn't seem to be interested. But that weekend, Prince Philip was speaking at the Officers Club at our dining in. That's where the officers on base would go and get dressed up in our special uniforms and so on and have dinner with the Prince. And he gave his speech, and then he said, I'd like to talk to the air crew that chased the UFOs, earlier in the week. So we sat down with him and had dessert and cigars and a few drinks and talked about UFOs for an hour. And he was a very strong believer in UFOs. And I asked Prince Philip why he personally was interested in UFOs, and he said that his uncle who raised him, Earl Mountbatten, had seen them up close when he was the head of the Navy. One flew over the Mediterranean in a whole group of British ships, and almost thousands of British seamen saw the UFOs go over. Then later he was the last viceroy to India, and that he had seen them in India as well. And finally, he had one land on his estate in England, and he didn't say that he saw them, but in his biography, it says that his most trusted military manager, who had been with him in the Navy, was now running the estate, had seen the UFO, a disc up close, and had seen an alien come out of it. And as a matter of fact, as I understand, shook hands with him or something. But in any case, Prince Philip really convinced me that this was all true and that they existed, and that his interest was so great that he tried to talk to all the air crews that had seen and chased UFOs throughout England, and he would be notified when, one was chased, and he would make arrangements to see them, either coming to the palace, or he or his aide would go out and interview them, depending on how good the case was.
Got it. Okay. Frank, how much longer is this insult going to be perpetrated?
Boy, I'm telling
prolonged?
You. Yes, I know. It's just
when you think about it, all those 1950s Hollywood sci-fi movies, which really did an awful lot to scare a lot of Americans, was going on at the same time that the Air Force officially ordered its combat jet pilots to shoot these things down. And that went on for at least a couple of years, 53, 54, right in that slot. This is when these Invaders from Mars, War of the Worlds, all those movies were coming out of the 1950s. And also, up until the late 60s, early 70s, America's newspapers, which were owned by thousands of different owners, not just 6 corporations, were reporting local sightings all the time. All the time.
Yes.
They were reporting, and the lid came down, and they were all told no more reporting on UFOs, and the stories basically just dried up and went away in the 70s. But in the 50s and 60s, there are just zillions of stories of sightings.
And we're still getting them, We're getting almost 1,000 a month. By the way, just last week we had a UFO disc land in New York on a road, and we have a good picture of the disc that'll be out in my filer's files this weekend.
All right, where did the disc go? Daylight, nighttime? Where does it fit in?
Well, and I think it was December 22nd, and it was. It looks like it's a disc, right as the sun's going down. We'll say, 5 o'clock or something. And there's 3 or 4 pictures of it that seem that seem real. I guess, you never know for certain with a photo these days. But it looks like a real photo. And as a matter of fact, New York, for some reason, has had multiple sightings over the last month, probably more than any other state. I wonder if it has something to do with the New York deciding that they can kill babies up until birth.
After birth, in some cases. This is not. I don't know. They talk about us as being the most sentient species on the planet, the caretaker of the planet. We're getting to be dumber and dumber all the time. We know this, and I just don't think we are going to be in charge much longer. I think it'll eventually, and I mean very short term, 3 to 5 more years, AI will begin to rise to be the dominant form of, quote, intelligence on the planet.
Well, I taught school for a while, and the school was teaching the kids how to have an abortion, how to kill the babies, and they wonder why, kids are killing other people, but they're taught that life is very cheap, that you can kill any baby anytime. And since Roe v. Wade, we've killed something like 55 million to 60 million babies. The kids are well aware of this and are upset by it. And there's a few that take extra steps, I think. News media never talks about abortion, but I think personally it's why the kids do a lot of the things that they're doing these days, because they've cheapened life.
Life has been reduced to a box of tissues, disposable, just to be used and discarded. That's it. That's unfortunately, yeah.
Well, I feel very strongly about this subject, but,
Right, understood. Well, a lot of people listening do as well. Let's see. Hold on a second here. Okay. We can talk a little bit about Forrestal here, I guess. And then after the break, we have some other things to get to. Do we know more information about the murder of
I wanted to share some information
Forrestal,
with you,
Frank? Yeah, go ahead.
I mentioned to George about, Peter Robbins and his fine documentary. And about 2 weeks ago, the History Channel they started a new series called Exposing UFO Secrecy. And they had a short segment on about Forrestal. And somebody had come forward saying that he had access to seeing the alien bodies at the from the Roswell crash site. And it said that when he approached one of the bodies and touched it, he started getting these tremendous ringing sensations inside of his head. And thereafter, anytime he was around any of the bodies, he would get severe migraine headaches. But this person who volunteered this information, I know it's not in Peter's documentary, but this is some new information regarding Forrestal and his interaction with, this UFO secrecy that went on from Roswell up until the time, that he wanted to go public with this information and, his life was ended for him. I thought it was very interesting that somebody has come forward stating that he actually interacted with the bodies and he had these sensations from his interaction with the bodies.
We should mention to our audience that he was Secretary of the Navy and then Secretary of Defense. He was in a position to know this information.
He was the first Secretary of Defense. And about 2 weeks ago, I was up in the Princeton area, and, Peter mentions in his documentary about all these references in the Princeton area to Forrestal, and it's true. There's a Forrestal Conference Center up there, and Forrestal Square, and many, many buildings named after Forrestal in the Princeton area off of Route 1.
Wow. He knew. George, what have you heard about James Forrestal, Secretary of Defense, wanting to go public with this? A lot of people will throw this around as the reason he was killed, but do you have any direct input on that?
Well, I've heard that, and that they claim he was mentally ill. Whether he really was or not, I don't know, but was in the hospital. Yeah. And fairly high up in the hospital, as I understand, and he was found dead quite a ways from the window. In other words, didn't look like he jumped. It looked like he was thrown out of the window, as I understand it.
It was too far for him to jump. Yeah, the distance from the building was silly. Too far. All right, stand by a couple.
Before.
Yes.
Jeff, we had mentioned this before, that Bill Tompkins said that when they were doing the debriefing of the German operatives during the Second World War at North Island and off San Diego, that Admiral Botta reported directly to Forrestal what was being learned, and Forrestal reported that directly to Roosevelt. So that was a very short chain of command, a very short chain.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Stand by. We'll be right back with more in just a couple. Okay. And we're back with Frank Chille and Major George Filer, who puts out the world's premier weekly UFO, ET, paranormal, fascinating historical stories newsletter every week, Filer's Files, and you can get a subscription. All you got to do is ask. Just write to George at Major, M-A-J-O-R, star, S-T-A-R, Major Star at Verizon.net. Tell him you heard him here and you'd like to please be put on the subscription roll, and you'll get them every Friday. Just beautifully produced, very intelligent, lots of pictures from all over the place in there every week. Okay, Frank, anything else you want to add?
Regarding the Forrestal information, I'm just so impressed with what Peter has put together and the research that he's done, and hopefully more of this information will come to the public's attention. It's all got to come out.
Well, it really is out. It's just people, they want to be told by their government. It's like trusting your doctor. There are rumors about the government that aren't very flattering, okay, as we could say, to put it mildly. So don't trust your government. Make your own decision. The data is there. If you just read Filer's Files for a few weeks and you're honestly skeptical, you won't be skeptical any longer. It's hard data that's there. And up at the top
documented. It's so well documented.
Well, it's all there. If you look up at the top of Rense.com right now, there is a new slider. We call them sliders when you have a bunch of different screens. It's supposed to be up there now, and it has some pretty spectacular freeze frame video grabs from a lot of different, it's not up yet, a lot of different UFOs and reports. But we'll get that up there shortly. Okay, George, you want to talk about C60? That's a fascinating price. C-60. Let me get it right. C-60. Bob Greska's Carbon 60 product. It's quite something.
Well, I've been taking it for 6 months or so, and in any case, I feel better and more energy, and I'm an older man and can do things that I did when I was young.
And this is you say 6 months you've been taking it?
Yes.
And when did you start to notice the change in energy and all of that?
That might have taken longer than average, like a month or so, but I was also Frank's been helping me with it, and I was taking a very low dose, like one drop.
One drop? Not one dropper full, one drop.
One drop, and lately I've been taking 2 drops in the morning and 2 drops at night. And that helps a lot more.
Very interesting.
No, I think it's an excellent product, and well, to be blunt about it, I have some heart problems, and I put a couple drops around my heart, and it seems to help my heart. Now, whether that's, I'm just saying that it seems to help me. Whether it would help anybody else, I don't know. I have heard that other people have, had like kidney problems or liver problems or whatever, and they put a couple of drops around their different organs, and that the organs seem to become stronger and, livelier, etc. In any case, I think it's worth trying for anybody to do. That it's a good product.
What George just said is interesting. It might have slipped by some of you. Put it near his heart, around his heart. When you put C-60.com, carbon 60, on your skin, if it's truly nano-sized, it will disappear. It goes right in. You rub it. It starts out black, looks like motor oil almost, but within a few minutes, there's nothing there. It's gone. These are truly nano-sized particles. They go right through your skin, and they're gone. That's one of the acid tests to find out if something really is nano or not. It's that tiny. It goes right through the skin. And I've seen this done, and it absolutely just vanishes after a couple of minutes. It's gone. Just put it on, let it sit, and then just rub it around a little bit. Put a drop on, just rub it around in a little circle. When you put it on your chest, it disappeared, didn't it, George?
Yes. I wear a T-shirt most of the time. And, I lift up the T-shirt, put on the carbon 60 and rub it around a little bit. And even with white T-shirts and so on, I've never gotten, any marks on my T-shirt from the medicine, so to speak. Mm-hmm. There's indication that it's very advanced type. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the right word is medicine, but viable for your energy and so on.
Right.
Oxidizes your problems. Supposedly it goes right to your cells and helps your individual cells.
Well, it's so small, it's so tiny, it does exactly that. It goes everywhere, and it's supposed to be 2,700 times more of an antioxidant than vitamin C. That's according to one researcher. This is a product that's in its infancy, and it's that's very interesting. 1 drop a day you were doing. Some people take a whole dropper morning and night. Dropper full.
Well,
it's like an
I've never
eyedropper.
taken very large amounts.
No, well, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, if you're getting results and you want to increase it slowly, give it a try for a few days. But this is the same kind of thing, George, that I've heard from people when I've done the programs about Greska's Carbon 60. They say the same kind of thing, that their core strength, kind of like life force, magnifies, and they have more energy and they can do more things. It's very interesting. Frank, are you using this?
I have used it. I need to order some more, but I've heard no negative comments regarding anybody using it. I have a good friend who's been using it for the last 2 years in North Carolina, and she has resolved almost all her health issues, and she started turning it on to her elderly cat and dog that she has, and she said, you cannot believe how lively they have become by her giving just a little bit into their food each day.
I got it. Yeah.
Judge only by the results. That's all we could say is judge only by the results. It's superior supplementation.
George, anything to add? Is Janet doing this too? I think she is, right?
Yes, she's.
How long has she been doing it?
She's taking it every night, but we're both doing. Well, we're elderly, frankly, and.
No, get out of here with that talk. There's no such thing. There's only elderly. Elderly is a state of mind, and you're not going there.
Well, we do a lot of things that. She put on a big Christmas dinner for 12 people yesterday, and our granddaughters came from North Carolina and L.A. and any case, we had a wonderful time with everybody there. Then my youngest granddaughter has never been to Disney World, and so her other grandfather, and myself are sending her to Disney World. She's a 7th grader because she always wanted to go.
Who's she going to go with?
Well, her aunt McGuire actually taking her.
Good. Very good. All right. We have still some time left. Anything you want to add about McGuire and Fort Dix? This is a very big case, but your point that there have been others is certainly well taken. There's no doubt that there have been others, but this one we know a little bit about. I wonder about the guy who actually pulled the trigger. Whatever happened to him? I'm just being rhetorical here. We'll never know, but try and live with that one. That's not easy.
No. I don't know if you mind if I tell you a war story.
No, go ahead.
I was a young captain, intelligence officer, going from TAC headquarters to 7th Air Force in Vietnam in Saigon, and I arrived a couple days after Christmas, and they said, "You're First Corps analyst," which is the northern part of Vietnam. And I didn't know much about Vietnam, and I didn't know the politics of the situation. And in any case, I started looking at all the intelligence coming in. We have road teams, and our aircraft are flying over, giving photographs, and all kinds of other intelligence was coming in. And I started noticing that a large North Vietnamese group with tanks and weapons and so on, with large numbers of men and so on, were heading for Vietnam, South Vietnam. Right. And our job was to write a weekly report on what was happening. And I said, it looks like the North Vietnamese are going to attack upper part of South Vietnam, probably at Khe Sanh, with tanks. And I put this in a report, and the report goes out to all of our Air Force units, plus the President and units all over the world, really. And then there's 2nd Corps, 3rd Corps, and 4th Corps. There's 4 of us that would write this intelligence report. Well, the report goes out, and a couple of days later, General McGuire wants me in his office. And make a long story short, he chews me out because I had said that tanks were going to attack North Vietnam. Or North Vietnamese tanks were going to attack South Vietnam. And he said General Westmoreland is very upset with the Air Force in stating that tanks are going to come into Vietnam, that he had just been in the United States and told all the politicians how wonderful the war was going and so on. And then I, as a liberal captain, was changing all this by claiming that the North Vietnamese were going to attack South Vietnam. And as it went on, we started saying that it looked like they were going to attack all over Vietnam at Tet. And then I got called in again, and they were really mad at me that the Army has no information that there's going to be any kind of an attack or anything. And you're saying that there's an attack. And Captain Murphy was on with me, and we both got chewed out for seeing this. Now, we saw what we felt was evidence, and we told the generals. But the generals didn't want to hear it because it ruined their political situation. And a couple of days later, on January 21st, Quezon was overrun by tanks. And each morning I'm briefing General McGuire, and he's smiling at me like, hey, that was good prediction, George. And we're predicting the 10 offensive as well. And a few days later, the embassy was attacked, and the war started with massive attacks by North Vietnamese and communist forces into Vietnam. So then I was...
Did you get any kind of a commendation for this, George?
By the generals. But up until then, I was in bad shape. Now, the second part of the story is, after a couple of days of briefing the generals, I decided I needed some sleep to go home to where I lived. And I'm walking along a wall. I don't know if you've been to Vietnam, but they have very tall walls, 7 foot tall. And as I'm walking along the wall, machine gun fire is hitting the wall, and the bullets are spraying cement that's hitting the wall, hitting my arms and legs and causing me to bleed. And I'm starting to run to get away from the machine gun bullets. And just then I'm thinking, God save me, my guardian angel save me as I'm running along. And I see this Jeep, and I run faster than I've ever ran in my life and dove in the back of the Jeep. And I was not hit by bullets. But I believe that I was saved or prevented from being hit by my guardian angel.
Sounds like it. That sounds like you had a protective hand there for sure. The worst shots in the NBA, huh?
Right. So I lived through it, but I feel that maybe some of these aliens are angels and they're here to help us. At least they've helped me.
Well, they certainly
similar situations.
They could act in that role, whether they're angels or not. It seems that they have that kind of ability. So, yeah, I mean, for sure.
And that the Bible tells us that they give us, certain gifts to people that believe. I don't know if people out there believe, but when you're in a foxhole or when you're being shot at or you're in a very difficult situation, it's worth calling for help, I feel. And God gives us certain gifts of, faith, and healing, and wisdom, and ability to predict the future, and so on, that it's worth looking into if you haven't in the past. That the Bible says God created heaven and earth and even made us, and so I think that there's a lot to that more than people realize.
Well, I just
Christmas time, so I thought I'd mention that.
Good. Going back to the Greska's Carbon 60, you always sound good, but you sound, what's the word, Frank? It's not
more
stronger.
And
he just sounds more.
There. His life force has been increased. It really has.
There you go. That's it. You hear it too.
Yep. And when I'm with
feel
him,
better,
I'm telling you, George. George
kiss my wife good night every night.
Wait, hold on, George.
Increased vitality, and you can see it in his step when you're with him. You can see it. And
I have a wonderful wife that helps me, in every way. So I'm lucky that way.
And now, how long?
For each other.
How long has Janet been trying this?
Well, we've been married 61 years.
No, the Carbon 60.
Oh, the Carbon 60. She's only taken a month or so. I kind of forced her into it. That I think she thought that I was doing better. That might help her.
Well, very good. Very good indeed.
They're a wonderful
and
couple. What a wonderful couple.
Oh, I know. It's almost like a fairy tale story.
It is.
When you go ahead, George.
Well, my life has been full of airplane crashes and war stories and all kinds of things going on. Close calls on, cars hitting us and tankers blowing up. In other words, if I didn't have somebody guarding over me, I think I would have been gone a long time ago.
Right.
That.
The machine gun episode alone. Yeah.
And I think even finding Carbon 60 through Frank was, kind of like angels watching over me. He's Frank, kind of an angel,
Yeah, Frank introduced me to it. So. There we go. We've had Bob on the program a couple times, 3-4 times. Now, when you do this, you're 2 drops a day now?
2 in the morning and 2 in the evening. How do
you make sure you just get 2 drops out of that eye drop?
Well, I don't really. I'm just.
Oh, I see. Okay. It's approximation. All right.
Right.
That's
approximation.
Fine. That's fine. All right. Okay. Now, this week's Filer's Files is out. This is number 52.
Right.
When did 52 come out? Yesterday, was it? Day before?
Well, it should have been Christmas Eve or whatever.
Yeah. That's the last one. It's amazing how fast it goes. Next week will be number 1.
The year certainly went fast.
I think, it went by in about 5 or 6 months. That was it.
Yes. And Jeff, I want to share this with you and your audience. George is going to be a featured speaker at a UFO conference that's going to be held on January 4th in Hamilton Township. And it's going to be a one-day event, and George is going to be one of the featured speakers.
And where's Hamilton Township, so we know?
It's right outside of Trenton, and it's in Camden County. I believe it's Camden County, isn't it, George, or is that Mercer County?
Well, right outside Trenton, the capital of New Jersey. I don't know.
So it's how far from your home is it? An hour away?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So give us the formal name of this. Do you have it? Is there a location people can look online for it, Frank?
Well, Pat Marcadillo is putting it on. It's his 61st conference. And,
wow. That's hard to believe.
He's been doing this for quite some time.
And almost every famous UFO person you can think of has been there, which I've met quite a few of them.
Are people, when you go out to these things, George, I was always curious, are people still coming up to you afterward and kind of catch you on the side of the stage or something, say, hey, Major Filer, I've got something for you here? People give you stories like that?
William Tompkins came up to me that way.
Did he?
And,
really?
NASA, high-ranking NASA people. I don't know if I can even use their names, but they're doctors and the like, and say, yeah, what you say about Mars and UFOs is all true, but we're told we can't tell you about them. In other words, they whisper to me. Same with the astronauts.
Well, we've got that new, what's actually a rerun of a wonderful UFO splash art feature at the top of the homepage. Take a look at those. I went through the video and grabbed a lot of, pictures. They're video grabs, and they're all strung together up there. They're kind of fun, too. Fascinating. Look at the one coming out of the airliner. And that's something coming right up out of the clouds. That is wild. All right. Thank you, George, very much.
Just want to mention my book that people might, if they're interested in my stories, we got lots of them, called
Mention the book,
Craft.
Please. Yeah, John Guerra is the author, Guerra, Strange Craft, and it's the story of Major George Filer. It's one of the great reads around. Thank you, George, again. Say hi to Janet for me.
You're welcome.
Okay, good
Merry
night.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you, George. Frank, same to you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Thanks for everything.
My pleasure, and some great stuff is in the offing for the new year, Jeff. And it's a pleasure to be able to cooperate with you and to bring this information to the public's attention.
Well, it's the foremost venue in the world, I think, for this kind of information. Thanks to you and George and those who participate. All right, Frank, thank you. Be well. Take care.
Take care. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
All right, that's our program tonight. We'll be right back with you tomorrow night. And how bizarre, it's Friday night tomorrow night. So hope to have the pleasure of your company then. Talk to you soon.